WisconsinEye is at the Eau Claire Public Library interviewing candidates in the special election in Senate District Number 10. State Representative Adam Jarchow of Balsam Lake now represents the 28th Assembly District, but he's running in that special election for the state Senate. Representative, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you're only in your second term, so talk to me about where you've had an impact in your first two terms. What do you think you've contributed the most in your first two or three years in office?
Boy, thank you for that question. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity. I feel really proud of the legislation that I've helped shepherd through the state legislature. First and foremost, starting last year, we got some significant property rights bills done. We got the Right to Hunt Act done. We did bills that protected property owners, homeowners, and taxpayers last year. And then this session, fast forward, I promised when I ran for re-election that I'd work on something called the Homeowners Bill of Rights. Senator Tiffany and I took that up right away. We began working on it, began working with stakeholders, and then just a week before last, the governor signed our Homeowners Bill of Rights into law. And what makes me most proud about that is that we got it done in a bipartisan way. Both of those bills got done in a bipartisan way. So over the last two terms, I've gotten over a dozen bills signed into law by the governor that protect sportsmen, protect homeowners, protect property owners. One of the things that I co-authored was the REINS Act, which was a huge win to rein in bureaucracy. So I feel like I've had some success in the state assembly, and I look forward to carrying that through into the state Senate.
Your campaign Facebook account quotes Ronald Reagan. Government is the problem. That sounds like Grover Norquist that drowned it in a bathtub, but maybe, is that overstating it? I mean, do you really want to rein in state government that much?
I think state government does need to be reined in. Government at all levels needs to be reined in. I don't think that when the founders put our founding documents in place that they intended for us to be micromanaged from cradle to grave. I think the founders envisioned a country in which people live their lives with a certain amount of freedom, liberty, and without interference from the government. And so I think Ronald Reagan's quote was good then, and it is great now, particularly since government has grown so much over the last number of years. Senate
District 10 is a whole state away from southeast Wisconsin. Yet, I believe you voted for the Foxconn incentive package, correct?
I did not.
You did not. Thanks for the correction. You voted against it. Why?
Listen, I have come reluctantly to the conclusion, only because other states do it, that at times we have to provide some of these sort of subsidies, but it's very reluctant because I don't think government should be interfering in the private market. And here, this is a massive interference in the private market. When you talk about $3 billion and the kind of money that we're spending, just think about it. In an annual Wisconsin state budget, we spend $37 billion. This is $3 billion. Now, it's over time, so it's not over in 1 year, but that is a lot of money. So maybe I could have gotten there on something like that, but when Foxconn got regulatory exemptions that the business owners in my district and the farmers in my district didn't get, right. I just couldn't live with that. I think it's unfair to ask farmers and small business owners and individuals 350 miles away from where this plant is going to be located to subsidize the payroll of that plant and play by different rules. I just think that's totally unfair. So had my request been granted that the same playing field would have been put in place for the people in my district, the businesses in my district, I maybe could have gotten there, but it would have been a heavy lift anyways at $3 billion.
Okay, I apologize for getting your vote on the Foxconn wrong. As you talk to voters in the 10th district, was your vote against the Foxconn incentives, is that popular or is it criticized?
Oh no, I think people understand that this is a big expenditure, a long ways away, and a pretty significant interference in the free market. And so people certainly understand, and I've gotten a lot of folks, both Democrat and Republican, who have said thank you for that vote. I mean, it is not easy sometimes when you have to stand up to your own party's leadership and vote no, but I don't work for party leadership. I work for the people right now in the 28th, and if I'm fortunate enough to be elected to the Senate, I'll work for the people of the 10th, and I will always do what I think is right for them, not what party leadership or special interests want.
Senate District 10 is a very interesting district. You have farming, and yet you have in the Hudson border with Minnesota, one of the fastest growing regions. So transportation, highway funding, you've been present during that stalemate, that gridlock, all those closed caucuses. What's your thoughts on how to pay for our highways in the future?
Yeah, so I was one of the ones that opposed increasing the gas tax. I don't think that in a state like Wisconsin, where we're still one of the higher tax states in the country, that we ought to be raising taxes. So a couple of things. One, I think we spend far too much money on mega projects, particularly in the southeastern part of the state. Listen, we have rural roads, we have town roads and county roads that have potholes that we can fill and fix for, a few $1,000, $100,000, $1 million. We're building multi-billion-dollar interchanges in southeastern Wisconsin like they're going out of style. And while I understand that that's the hub of commerce in Wisconsin and that it's certainly going to cost more, and we ought to, that's good for the farmers and businesses in my district to have that transportation network there, we have to be fair about it. And I don't think the funding is necessarily fair right now. I think too much of it goes to these mega projects in southeastern Wisconsin. So what I have said is I think transportation is one of the fundamental important things that government does. Some people say education is number one, transportation is number two. Some people say vice versa. Either way, it's a huge priority, and we ought to take care of that priority. So I don't know why we can't use some general fund dollars if we have some of those priorities. So I've never had this opposition that some have with supplementing the transportation fund with some general fund dollars, so long as the people in northwestern Wisconsin are being treated fairly, so long as we're taking care of town roads and county roads and not just doing huge expansion projects.
But no to raising the gas tax, the license plate renewal fee, and your feelings on tolling?
I'm not a fan of tolling. I mean, where we live, people cross that border back and forth to Minnesota every day. So the idea of putting tolling, particularly there, I would be absolutely opposed to.
The Senate District 10 is also unique in that it has two four-year universities. As we struggle to determine how much the state, the UW system should get, have funding cuts hurt those two universities in District 10?
Yeah, I was just at UW River Falls earlier this week and with some of the leadership and some of the community leaders, and I don't think it has. I think what it's done is made the universities more nimble. Now we're talking with the Board of Regents about this sort of merger combination plan.
With the colleges?
Yeah, yes. And I think that what we do when we say, you got to tighten your belt a little bit, we put the tuition freeze on, which is really, really important for working families, particularly in my part of the state. What we say to folks is, hey, listen, the private sector has to tighten their belt, and so do you. And you have to innovate, and you have to do things differently. We can't just do things the way we've always done them. Sometimes we have to think about doing things differently, particularly using technology. So we still have some of the top-notch universities in the country, and I think we're all committed to keeping it that way.
You voted for Mr. Nygren's package. They almost passed without any dissent on the opioid and heroin epidemic. What are your thoughts on the next steps to fight this problem?
So when I talk to law enforcement in my area, this is the St. Croix County Sheriff's Department, Polk County Sheriff's Department, Burnett County Sheriff's Department, what they tell me the most important thing that we can do, is, both with heroin and meth, is to build Trump's wall. They tell me there is nothing more important to stopping the flow of illegal drugs into this country than to stop the open borders that we have in the South. So obviously that's a federal issue, but I think it's an important issue that state legislators can continue to push our federal colleagues to get done, because it impacts lives in northern Wisconsin. So I was proud to support the HOPE package. I will continue to support the HOPE package, but we can't forget that while heroin is a big problem, particularly in the eastern part of the state, in our part of the state, it's really meth. It is the big, big problem.
Yeah, the Attorney General's office says meth cases, unfortunately, are growing dramatically in western Wisconsin. But sorry to interrupt.
No, but you're absolutely right. And I think one of the reasons that I'm supported by law enforcement like Burnett County Sheriff Ron Wilhelm is because I'm committed to continuing to work on that issue, to provide the resources necessary for law enforcement to fight that issue, and to getting it back under control.
You've also heard the arguments in caucus over dark stores. Mm-hmm. The idea of how do you value stores that large retailers that are closed, should the same lower values be applied to open, thriving stores? What's your position on those pending bills?
Listen, we got to be really, really careful to do the right thing here and strike the right balance. And I'm not 100% sure that those bills quite do it yet. Okay. They've made improvements over time. So we have to balance making sure that people are treated fairly and that we're not undertaxing some so that some are overtaxed, but at the same time, we don't need a tax increase on our businesses in this state. So I think we have to do this right, and Representative Brooks, who's leading this in the Assembly, is a good, smart guy who is committed to finding the right balance here. I'm confident that we'll get to that right place. I'm not sure we're quite there yet.
Okay. One of the bills you may vote on, whether you're in the Senate or the Assembly, is the pending bill that would ban research on fetal tissue from elective abortions. Your position?
I'm a supporter of it. I'm 100% pro-life. I think that the idea that we can't protect fetal tissue from this kind of exploitation, it's really sad. It's a really sad commentary on our culture. It's something that I think to some is very personal, but to me, this is an important public policy discussion because we've seen sort of a deterioration in culture, and this is a culture issue to me, that we are protecting the most vulnerable and not providing any incentive for abortion.
3 members of your caucus recently authored a bill that would lower the drinking age to 19 if we didn't lose $53 million a year in federal highway funds.
Right.
Your position?
Well, I'm one of the 3. So obviously I'm supportive of it. And the biggest reason why is, again, this is federal overreach, right? When the federal government does what it does here, which is says, hey, states, you have to do what we tell you, or we're going to take the money away that, oh, by the way, you pay to us in tax dollars. I think that's completely wrong. It's exactly the reason why Governor Walker was right when he rejected the Medicaid expansion, because we should not be in the business of being extorted by the federal government. The second sort of more fundamental policy issue is, what is the right age? And I think there's a lot of people that on both sides that could say 21 is the right age. I've had people say, hey, we should not allow it ever. I don't think that would be a majority position anymore, but whether it's 21 or 19 or 20, I think the important part is that we're having this discussion about what is right for our young people, because I hear from folks pretty regularly, particularly at universities, that are pleading for some help here because we have this binge drinking issue, and that's really what we want to get under control, is that problem.
Those 3 co-sponsors, that's you, Representative Swearengin, and Representative Duco?
Correct.
Okay. The issue of greatest need of this 10th Senate District, as you talk to voters?
Well, a couple of things. First and foremost, workforce. Workforce. I think Governor Walker is 100% right that when he first ran for office, and actually when I first ran for office, what we talked about was jobs, but now we have one of the lowest unemployment rates that we've ever had. We have the greatest number of people working that we've had. And what I hear from people in my district, from business owners in my district, from HR professionals in my district, is we are providing, as a government, and this is state and federal, too much incentive to too many people not to work. That they regularly have people that will apply for the job just so that they can meet the criteria to keep whatever benefit it is that they're keeping. The most sad thing that I hear is people say, I don't want that raise. I don't want that promotion, because I will lose my benefit. We should never, ever, ever subsidize anybody to the point where they say, I don't want to work. If we start taking, careers are a ladder, so you start at the bottom, you work. Well, if we take out the middle rungs of that ladder, because people say all of a sudden, I don't want that promotion, or I don't want that raise, by the time they get to those prime earning years, they're way behind, and it's really bad for them, their families, their communities, and society as a whole. So we have to incentivize people to work and stop incentivizing people to not work.
You and Senator Tiffany, besides working on the Homeowners Bill of Rights, also have done work on the problem of wolves. Can you update us, who is watching this, on the wolf issue? Is it still protected federally?
It is.
What options what if any options does Wisconsin have?
So I'm really proud that Senator Tiffany and I have been at the forefront of fighting on this issue. And this issue right here is the prime example of our dysfunctional Congress. What is dysfunctional about Washington, D.C.? We have Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson and Sean Duffy and Colin Peterson, Democrats and Republicans, co-sponsoring bills both in the House and in the Senate to delist the wolf in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Wyoming. That bill is pending. How can you have Ron Johnson and Tammy Baldwin co-authoring a bill and you can't get it passed? If that doesn't scream dysfunction, I don't know what does. And so we're going to continue to push on it. And just last month, Senator Tiffany and I introduced a bill that sort of follows what Idaho did to put pressure on Congress a few years ago to delist the wolf there, which would say in Wisconsin, if this was passed, our wolf management program would end. We'd be done with it until Congress delisted the wolf and allowed Wisconsin to once again manage our own wolf population. In effect, we have a partnership here with the federal government, and the federal government is in breach of its partnership. It is acting in bad faith, and I don't see any reason for us to continue in Wisconsin when the federal government is acting in bad faith.
Some residents of southern Wisconsin may say, how bad is the wolf problem in northern Wisconsin? How bad is it?
It's horrendous. It is absolutely horrendous. So the population goal is 300 to 350.
Yeah.
We're up to over 900. Last year, the 2016 year, more depredations than ever before. And this is cattle being killed. This is dogs being killed. We just had to have a wolf put down in Superior a week or two ago.
That's right. It was too close to humans.
Because it had lost its fear of humans. We had a wolf summit Senator Tiffany and I did a year ago or so, a little over a year ago, where we brought in a lot of different stakeholders. And one of the people we brought in was a police chief from the UP, Marinisco, Michigan. And he said that he is confident that if we don't get this under control, there will be human lives lost. And I don't think we should have to wait for a kid to be killed by a wolf before we do what's right, before we do what everyone always agreed to, which is a reintroduction of the wolf in a limited amount, but controlled and managed to about 300 or 350. That is what every single stakeholder agreed to, and now the federal government is in absolute violation of that agreement.
You've been a critic of the DNR. Is it doing better under the former Secretary Kathy Stepp? Are you still as angry, as concerned about the DNR as you were when you first ran?
I'll tell you, the DNR has been a real issue in my district. I'm very optimistic because we have Secretary Meyer and Deputy Secretary Thiede are working really hard. Jake Curtis just took over as the new chief counsel. And so we've got a good leadership team in place. And what I hope they do is bring some needed balance to that agency. That agency, my biggest beef with it is it's not customer service orientated. And I'll give you an example. There's a farm in Grantsburg. They've been on their land for over 100 years. Great community people, great family, great farmers. They've wanted to do an expansion project. And they keep getting, no, you're on a wetland. Well, the entire part of Grantsburg, all of Grantsburg used to be under a lake. And so you have this issue with the land. Well, they're not a wetland, and so we actually brought the deputy secretary up to the farm and said, this is what we're dealing with. This is pasture land. This is not a wetland. And so, we all want to protect our wetland. I hunt and fish, and we want to protect our valuable wetlands. But when it's a pasture, and they just want to expand their barn a little bit to continue to grow the economy in northern Wisconsin, it is crazy to me that somebody from DNR didn't sort of take their hand and say, hey, we are open for business in Wisconsin. We're going to help you figure out a way to get this done. We shouldn't have had to brought the deputy secretary up there to make that happen.
Final question. Do you want to highlight any differences between you and your opponent in the December 19 primary, Representative Zimmerman?
Sure. I think that there's a couple of big differences. First, I've been in the Assembly for a term and a half, have gotten over a dozen bills signed into law by Governor Walker, big, bold, important reforms. Representative Zimmerman hasn't gotten any bills passed yet. And so I think that he has some ideas, but at the end of the day, what the people expect is results. And so I've proven in the Assembly that I can get results. The other place that people expect you to operate is to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And so I voted no on the budget because it increased spending by over $3 billion, added tax collectors, to balance that budget kind of on the backs of small business owners that the tax collectors then collect money from. And then there was all this kind of junk that got added into the budget at the end that the Assembly went along with. I voted no, but you remember we had some senators that said, well, we're not going along with all that stuff until the governor agrees that that he will veto that stuff out. So I think there's a big difference in you can't always just go with party leadership. Sometimes you have to stand up for the people you represent and do what you promised, which was, for me, smaller government, less spending, lower taxes.
Thank you. Representative Adam Jarchow of Balsam Lake now represents the 28th Assembly District. He's a Republican candidate in the December 19th primary in the 10th Senate District. Representative, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.